Hi, I'm Coeni van Beek. I'm here at USB Leaders Angle. I'm talking to you guys today about megatrends, more specifically 15 questions that I hope you will all think about. It's all about connecting the dots, and I hope you enjoy this edited version of my presentation. 5 megatrends, and this is now for the tactile learners. I've learned if you want to have people's attention in the Western Cape, if you enter a room with a box like this, you know, it really does something. If I do it in New York, everybody's like, I'm not sure what's going on there. So the first one, demographic and social change. There's very interesting shifts happening around the world pertaining to death rates, birth rates, where it's happening. Social changes, the empowerment of women. If you look at the whole issue in the US around gay rights and gay marriage, which literally in 2 years went from something like 30% of people thought that it's okay to have gay marriage, they're up to something like 78% now. That's a 2-year shift. That's a momentous shift in a really, really short period of time. Second one, shifting global economic power. I went into my little goodies bag, my little travel bag with all my passports, so you have the US dollar and you have the pound and the euro, and Ria, you need to keep your eye on this because, you know, this is South Africa, and I don't have a car guard. But it is interesting, this shift from Western Europe and that part of the world. And then I'm very optimistic. I put a rand, I put 100 rand in there, but Indonesian, rupiah, and renminbi. So that economic shift where the economic power is moving from the traditional Western democratic economies to different places in the world. And there's a lot of interesting things happening there. Rapid urbanization. Anybody who ever flew KLM business class? Got one? That's the only thing I could find on Rapid. But then I thought Rapid, and I wanted to impress you because I've traveled a lot. Rapid urbanization. And again, there's actually with KLM and the Dutch, the first people who really started moving around the world, as we know it today, were the Dutch. And it's interesting if you look at Netherlands today and the role that they play and how they've absolutely cemented themselves as a knowledge and trading industry. Climate change and resource scarcity. Wine Master Reserve. It's scarce. And then technological breakthroughs, and this is the only one for which I have a cheat sheet. This is sugarcane, by the way. What they do is they take this and they break it down to the most basic plant form, cells. Then they do stuff with it, words that I can't pronounce, that makes this herbicide resistant. Then they put it back in the ground, and then it grows better, and it's herbicide resistant, so you can throw herbicides on it, but it doesn't die. Now, the implication of that is actually really cool because it means bigger crops, and you can actually make fuel out of this. It's sugar. It's one of the purest form of fuel. And ethanol, I think it's ethanol that they can get out of it. But it's really cool, and I thought something to remind us of technological shifts. Demographic and social shifts. Life expectancy is a big issue there. Decline in birth rates. Human migration, it is amazing how you see. Those of you who actually live here don't see it. If you fly into Cape Town every 6 months and you drive around and you see how people move and the migration of people, if you go through Oliver Tambo and you see that there's a lot of this happening. The status of women is gradually changing. It's actually one of the places where South Africa do pretty well on all the international indexes. It's interesting, this shift, where does the money lie? You know, we talk about the middle class and the value of that and home ownership and all of that. But if you look at what's happening in India, if you look at what's happening in China, to a lesser extent in South Africa, but also all over Africa, Rebalancing of international relationships, we see this all the time. The whole nuclear race that's happening at the moment is part and parcel of this. Rapid urbanization, my 5 little houses, climate change and resource scarcity. This is the easiest one. It's energy, it's food, and the one people often forget is water. What's interesting here in the technology field is it's just the speed at which this happens. Nanotechnology, fabrication, 3D printing, cloud computing, very interesting how even in PwC, how we look at security so differently, IT security and cybercrime and that sort of thing. We're very close to the point where the knowledge that we generate in this second is double the knowledge we generated in all of time before this second. And then the next second, we duplicate that again. If you start to think about the size of that, it's pretty cool. What's really cool about the megatrends, it's when you have that collision, that point where these megatrends come together. And that's where the business opportunity lies for the businessman. That's where the political opportunity lies for the politician. That's where, if we want to engage the generation that is actually sadly underrepresented in this room from what I can see, and no reflection on your age, but we don't seem to have many millennials in here. That's the kind of stuff that they think is really funky. Another one that you might want to think about is the city-state. I actually think that Cape Town is perfectly positioned to, I get goosebumps when I think about it, because I think if we work the city right, we can really become that definition of a city-state, where there's excellence, where everything is done well, where people have work, where we have innovation hubs, where we pull all of this together. Is there anything left to be optimistic about in Africa? I'm actually very, very optimistic about Africa. There's a couple of interesting things that has happened in the past decade or so. It's been interesting to see that Africa actually did maintain growth in a period where a lot of places around the world we struggled. I think what's really powerful in Africa is consumerism, rise of the middle class, really big one, positive things. If you're a business person here and you can talk to the African middle class, you have a captured audience. The story is all about access to financial services. And we're really blessed in South Africa in that we have a very, very, very mature FS system. The gender gap in Africa is really good. Africa actually does fairly well in the gender space. And it is interesting to see how so much of the development in Africa nowadays are actually funded through private equity. What about South Africa? So if you sit in the US for 6 months or so, everybody was watching the Pistorius case. You have no idea how big that thing was. My intellectual peers and colleagues at PricewaterhouseCoopers, of whom a lot are lawyers, was so impressed by the fact that at least we still have the rule of law in South Africa. I think South Africans are tremendously friendly. And it's not because I speak the language and I love the people. I just think we're really, truly a friendly people. What's up with millennials? Who of you can actually tell me what's the definition of a millennial? People born after 1990. If you don't surround yourself and actively engage in understanding millennials, if it's the only thing you take away from this session is get to know young people, this is actually a really, really nice read. It's our annual CEO survey. But it is interesting, a couple of things came out of this. For the first time in 5 years, CEOs in this, and it's a global survey, actually think that there's more opportunity in the US than in China. They actually have, the biggest concern they have is over-regulation. A lot of the screw-ups in Africa that we have is because we don't have enough structure. We shouldn't equate structure with regulation. I think if we're going to fall into the trap of just regulating all the time, first thing, it creates the opportunity for corruption. A lot being said about, let me just make sure I've got it all, government debt, the whole RRRR issue around skills, right place, right time, right price. If you can crack the code, and at 12:45, it's definitely in your benefit to crack the code, to figure out how the skills that we have here, you can connect with somebody who's willing to pay you $1 or €1 amount for those skills, while you keep that skill set on our cost base. There's a lot of opportunity there. Is the US still important? Yes. As I mentioned, actually the first time in 5 years, CEOs feel that the opportunity to grow their business is bigger in the US than in China. What about Japan? People will always ask me, well, what about Japan if you talk Asia? The Japanese sits with a really interesting social thing in that they're aging, they're graying at a tremendous rate, and their women are not active in the workforce. If you listen to their president, around his Abenomics strategy, there's a lot happening on how do we pull women into the workforce. They have lifelong employment, but here's the kicker with the Japanese. They actually sit on boatloads of savings. What geographies matter? I've mentioned to you my bias that I have personally towards Africa, and I think it's a well-founded bias. I think the Middle East has some really interesting challenges. If we can figure out how to make things work there, or just accept that they maybe don't work the way we think they should work. Central and Eastern Europe and the Confederation of Independent States, CEECIS. A lot of opportunity if you can, in the stance, if you can get around corruption, which is a big issue. Then obviously China, India. I will never write of Indonesia. Indonesia is one of my favorite countries in the world. They actually get a lot of things really right. They have a democracy that actually works in the biggest Muslim democracy in the world. Don't write of the Indonesians. Turkey, part of the Middle East, think about Mexico, but I think the Americans is all over that one. Those are the geographies that really matter. Any hope for innovation? I actually think that one of the things, if we get it right in South Africa, maybe in Cape Town, is how we start to think about innovation. But we need to think about things like incrementalism. We think innovation is brand new stuff. It's often about execution. There's often really, really cool ideas. I will challenge you, if you have something that you're really struggling with at work, get the 5 youngest people in your company together and say, do you have an idea how we can solve it? Is off the grid possible? Yes, totally. And I think you need to think about it. I see off-grid houses are now for sale in Somerset West. No electricity bill, no water bill. Off-grid business is the next one. If you can take your business off the grid. How to survive the megatrends. So here's one of the things that I personally struggled with. You almost get to this point, oh, where's all of this going? Get comfortable with the fact that a 20-year-old knows more about things, that they're more intuitive on some of these things. So that will be my advice on the megatrends. Understand them in your business context, and actually use it as a conversation starter when you talk to younger people, when you talk about business opportunity. And final thoughts on Cape Town. You live in really pretty much one of the coolest places in the world. And I think I can actually say that. I've been to a lot of places in the world. And I tell you, there's not a lot of places cooler. And think about it. We have nice people. We have 2 oceans. We have frickin' nice mountains. We have amazing agriculture. We just have, in a radius of 100 kilometers, we really have Eden here. Unfortunately, Eden is an 18-hour flight away from New York. So we need to figure out how to bridge those gaps. We need to figure out how we're going to deal with mega migration. If we get Cape Town right, people want to live here. There's something, if you're an amazing city, there's stuff that comes with it. Rapid urbanization is one of it. How are you going to think about it? How are you going to address the water problems of tomorrow? Is it time to actually start taxing underground water? A lot of things to think about. That's my final thoughts on Cape Town.